is run by paid investment bankers, and their modus operandi.
Hello, I'm Fernando Luque, Senior Financial Analyst for Morningstar in Spain, and I'm joined today by NizamHamid. Nizam is Head of ETF Strategy and Deputy Head of Lixor ETFs. Thank you for being here, Nizam.
You're very welcome.
Well, Nizam, it seems that we are in the middle of a battle between those who defend the physical replication and those who, like Lixor, defend the synthetic replication. For our users who are not experts in ETF, can you remind us the difference between the physical replication and the synthetic replication?
I think the most important thing to bear in mind is not necessarily the differences between the two methods, but the fact that both types of funds, physical or synthetic, are UCITS funds, and therefore both funds are covered very much by the UCITS regulation on a European basis. So yes, you have different strategies followed by the different providers, the index returns for the ETF, but also at an end investor level, what I think is very important is understanding that at the end of the day you have a UCITS product. You have very strong regulation, and therefore issues like counterparty risk, the amount of counterparty risk, is fully regulated in that context. So we don't really see it as being physical ETF issuers having a particular point of view or synthetic issuers having another point of view. For me, it's important to highlight to all the clients that actually risk exists in all the different structures that you have, be it physical or synthetic. Yep. Both have different elements of risk.
Okay, and what would you say are the advantages or the disadvantages of both structures?
I think on the physical side it is potentially easier for investors to understand the physical holding of the assets in the fund, but then also on the physical side investors need to understand the risks of securities lending in the fund and the collateral and the counterparty risk that brings with it. Physical funds also have sometimes optimization risks in terms of the performance of the fund versus the benchmark. On the synthetic side, you have very much the headline synthetic counterparty risk. But if you look at synthetic ETF providers, if you look at what we've been doing at Lixor, we've been doing a daily reset of our swap to bring the counterparty risk down to zero, a target of 0% counterparty risk. So on the synthetic side, you have a structure on the unfunded swap side where you own physical assets. So we have close to 100% physical assets in the fund, but an investor can see on our website easily, anytime, for every fund, and you can see the swap level as well. So we're doing our best to help people understand the amount of risk, if any, that exists in a synthetic fund, whilst they can also see the performance of the fund very easily as well.
Yeah. You mentioned the resetting of the swap as a way to reduce the risk. Are there other ways of minimizing this risk for the investor?
Well, I suppose if you look at the fully funded swap structure, where the fund has 100% swap exposure, the way that structure minimizes risk is to have over-collateralization, say 120% assets provided to the fund. For us on the unfunded swap structure, the daily reset is the best way of having a mix between index tracking and assets within the fund. I think for physical funds, the means of minimizing risk is to explain the risk of either tracking error or counterparty risk within physical funds.
Yeah, even if we can minimize this risk, there is a risk. And how is the investor compensated for this additional risk?
I think that there is. You talk about the risk. We have the liquidity of the assets. You have the very low tracking error that you have within synthetic funds. So if one looks at the benefits of, say, synthetic versus other types of index replication, you have, especially say in emerging markets or other asset classes, very low tracking error using a synthetic replication model compared to physical. You have the comfort of the assets within the fund, and you have typically lower transaction costs in terms of trading on exchange. So there are benefits to the end investor for trading a synthetic ETF compared to a physical.
Let's be very pessimistic. What would happen if effectively the counterparty go bankrupt?
Clearly, if the counterparty to the swap goes bankrupt, the swap has no value. But if, as we do with Lixor ETFs, you do a daily reset And so you exchange cash with the fund or the swap counterparty on a daily basis, and you target 0% counterparty risk. Well, if the swap value is zero anyway because you've done a daily reset, if your swap counterparty goes bankrupt, you have the physical assets in the fund with actually close to 100% NAV, so you actually wouldn't suffer a loss. So even though UCITS allows you to have 10% counterparty risk, if you're running at a daily reset with a target of zero, in the worst case scenario that you're discussing, the ETF holder would lose nothing because the swap level is close to zero.
Yeah. And to finish this interview, what would be your critics to the physical replication?
We see physical replication as being an efficient means of offering exposure. We just feel that we can deliver the same efficiencies and more in a synthetic model, which delivers a consistency of returns and tighter trading spreads for the end client. So it's not really a criticism of physical replication, it's the fact that we believe we can deliver greater benefits in the Lixor synthetic ETF model.
Okay, well Nizam, thank you very much for your point of view regarding the synthetic and the physical replication.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Run by Hayes investment bankers, and their modus operandi